Hello, Garland Nixon. I'm back. And guess who I've got this time? The one and only Mark Sleboda, straight out of Moscow. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here, and give me look. This has been a busy bit of a busy morning, so I'm still getting things set up for this. Everything that we got to do. All right, I better close a bunch of stuff down so that we don't see our little hourglass spinning in the middle of this interview, and Mark and I suddenly disappear on you. I'm trying to avoid that. All right, let's go, Mark. Couple of things, several things we need to talk about. Let's start here about the recent missile and / drone exchanges between Kiev and Moscow. Your thoughts on that? Interesting, these things happening days before Trump takes office. Kind of feel like the Biden administration's calling over. Fire more. We got to make things good. We got to call things crazy and hectic here. Your thoughts on the recent missile exchanges, Mark?
Garland, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show. So over the course of the last few days, we have seen for the scope of this conflict, a very large missile and drone attack by the U.S., by the Biden administration and the Kiev regime and the United Kingdom on Russia. They still, of course, use the weasel words in the Western media. The Biden administration allows the use of ATACMS missiles, but it's has never been denied, and it's been presented by no less a person than the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, when making excuses for why he didn't want to send Taurus cruise missiles. It's because these advanced missile systems require the use of Western military personnel from the respective countries on the ground in order to fire them. They have to code in the targeting data because of the proprietary and top secret software that would never, be transferred to a country like Ukraine, where it's well known that the Ukrainian government leaks like a sieve to Russian intelligence. So of course that wouldn't be allowed. And so when the Americans are firing ATACMS, when the Kiev regime is claiming to fire ATACMS, it's a U.S. missile fired by a U.S. launcher, guided to target by U.S. satellite data, and the targeting data is actually programmed into the computer or into the missile by U.S. military specialists on the ground. The same thing with the Storm Shadows, the cruise missiles that the British have provided, the Scalps, which are the same thing, the equivalent of the French. So that's why I say it is the Biden administration that launched missile attacks, right? And the Russian government has been quite clear about this. They regard it as an act of war. And it is only the restraint of the Kremlin and the knowledge that this is intended as a parting provocation by the Biden administration, and that the Trump incoming president-elect team has been quite clear. Trump himself made quite clear that he does not agree with these U.S. missile attacks into Russia. In fact, he thinks it's crazy, which it is. So that's the only reason why Russia has not responded with missile attacks on U.S. Territory or U.S. military assets around the world, although they reserve the right to do so, right, if things don't change into the future. Same thing with the British, the Storm Shadows. So this was the largest missile and drone attack yet. It occurred in several areas of Russia. Perhaps two of the biggest areas hit where the Bryansk region in the north of the Ukraine-Russia contact line. It is an area to the west of the fading Kursk incursion zone, and there's very much the possibility that the Kiev regime could launch another suicidal offensive in that area if the weather this winter turns back below zero and the ground freezes hard and solid, allowing off-road use of tracked military vehicles and the like. Right now, the weather in Ukraine and Russia is right around the freezing point, a few degrees above, a few degrees below. It's terrible weather for fighting. So you need to have the thermometer drop solidly below zero, the ground some time to solidly freeze, and then you might see some more shall we say, more maneuver offensives on one side or the other or both. But right now, it is basically a lot of contact. Fighting is still occurring, of course, right? There's no let up. In fact, you could even say it's intensified. But it's largely in urban or suburban areas where one side or the other already has a foothold, right? So you don't have to, go cross field in big open areas off road. They fired ATACMS missiles, ballistic missiles. They fired 6 ATACMS into Bryansk, as well as 6 Storm Shadows, and then a number of drones. And evidently, they were aiming for a chemical plant. Now, I have received no reports of any significant damage. I've seen some small fires. I've seen debris from some of the missiles causing some residential houses to catch on fire and the like. But I haven't seen any deaths, any casualties, and I haven't seen, the Russian government says they shot everything down and that there's no, damage. Even if they did get some through, there's been no photo or video evidence of any significant damage to this chemical plant. And that is a serious concern, because if you hit a chemical plant, I mean, God knows, what chemicals they're hitting and what the reaction of being hit with a ballistic missile. Usually not pretty good. There's a lot of dangerous chemicals at a chemical plant, depending on, what particular storage or building would be hit and the like. So there is the potential for a mass casualty and environmental damage effect if this had been successfully hit. We also once again saw attacks into the Kazan, the city to the southeast of Moscow, where the BRICS meeting was held this autumn. Right, it is the capital of Tatarstan in Russia, the Tatarstan region, and there are significant Russian military industrial complex facilities there. There's not a word that I've gotten of exactly what they were attempting to hit, because apparently it wasn't hit. They were intercepted. But just off the top of my head, I know that among many other things that that Kazan makes, Kazan is also reputedly the heart of the Russian military industrial complex's drone manufacturing. And Russia's making a lot of drones of a lot of different types. So that's would be a plum target if they manage to take out some of those facilities, but there's no word that they have. Russian air defense and electronic warfare seems to have done, once again, a very thorough job. Whether they took down everything or just enough that no significant damage, I leave that, you make your decision whether you believe the Russian Ministry of Defense or not. But I have not seen anything on Russian social media or media that would confirm any significant damage done. And those things are usually pretty hard to hide. right? And the Kiev regime would be crowing about it, putting pictures and photos and videos everywhere if they had successfully, and there's no indication that they have. But this was significant because it was the largest such combined drone and missile attack thus far by the Kiev regime, showing by far they're not out of it. And I think there's also an impetus from the United States in particular to use the last of the ATACMS missiles that were provided. We've been told recently that 500 of them were supplied, and at least according to the New York Times, a few weeks ago they only had 50 left. Well, start your clock there. We're well into the low 20s, at least I would say, of things they have left, but there's still a few more days till Trump takes office. So look for another more ATACMS attacks by the Biden administration into Russia over those next few days. I think it's also significant in the past few days, there was also an attempted drone attack in the Saratov region of Russia, southern Russia, at a gas compressor station for the Turk Stream pipeline. Now, with the shutting down because the Kiev regime refuses to renew or extend the gas transit contract that they were benefiting from to Southern Europe, Southern and Central Europe, there's only one pipeline currently carrying Russian gas into Europe. And that is the Turk Stream pipeline, which goes under the Black Sea through Turkey and from Turkey into Hungary and Serbia and Italy and a number of other countries along that route. And it is still a significant supply of gas. There's two pipelines, and they attempted a drone attack on the compressor station, of which my understanding is that the debris caused some minor damage near the compressor station, but there was never any stopping of the flow of gas, and what damage was quickly repaired. But it does show that there's vulnerability. If over the next couple of days, or even once Trump takes office, if the Turk Stream pipelines suddenly are destroyed, much like the Nord Stream pipelines, I think that while the Kiev regime may have a hand in it, I'm almost certain that this would not occur without the green light and almost certainly the active support of the United States. So if the U.S. wants to cut off Russian supply of gas to Europe 100%, that's the way to do it, right? They've already taken out Nord Stream, and that is certainly something that the Biden administration has obviously been doing, trying to separate Russia and Europe permanently, but also making them buy more expensive American LNG, which benefits American energy companies, and that's right up Trump's alley too. I mean, it has to be said. He's all drill, baby, drill. Whether it's oil or gas. And he's not at all above using heavy-handed methods, gangster methods. I would say, like the Biden administration has done to secure American energy interests in that way by kneecapping a competitor. That is entirely within the playbook, certainly of the Biden administration, and more than likely the Trump administration as well. I don't think that we can draw a line and say that any U.S. administration wouldn't do that at this point.
Yeah.
So that is a potential flashpoint, and certainly Erdogan would be furious if that happened. I mean, he would lose. He makes a lot of money off the transit off of that. The Kiev regime and the U.S. risk further alienating Turkey geopolitically in that regard. So it's not something they could do without any consequences. But it has to, be noticed that that is still a possibility that that could be done. Russia responded. Again, we don't know whether this was an already prepared missile, a salvo by Russia to do it, or whether this is intended, it was cobbled together very quickly as a response. I think probably more the former, and then they just say it's a response, so that they don't have to respond in any way. Again, if no huge damage was done, even though U.S. and British missiles were attacking inside Russia, with the Biden administration, the lame duck leaving office, Russia just doesn't feel the need to respond in an overhanded, way. They want to not escalate at this point. If the Trump administration continues the same policies, then they can escalate further, but they're going to at least give that a chance, I think. And again, because no huge damage was done right now, they're taking it on the chin. Let's say it that way. And because it's effectively a gnat sting at this point, it's not a huge blow to the chin. Russia responded with huge missile strikes. Again, the whole gambit of Russian missiles, of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, by some accounts, were used. And it seems primarily they hit the Kiev regime's electrical and energy infrastructure, including gas storage facilities in West Ukraine, which is very interesting because it's become apparent, that, if you're not going to renew that Druzhba pipeline, then you don't need any gas storage facilities there. We'll help you de-Sovietize, decommunize by getting rid of those things that the Soviet Union built, since you're not needing them anymore. And that appears to have been part of the calculus. There were very specific attacks on gas distribution and gas storage facilities within these attacks. So while the long-range strikes continue on both sides, and there's no sign of a letdown, in fact, everything still points towards escalation in the long-range strike. Russia continues to steamroll in the South Donbass. The operational crisis continues. Kharkov has been liberated. Toretsk has been liberated in all but the official Ministry of Defense announcement. My understanding is that the Kiev regime is still holding on to one mine on the outskirts, the northern outskirts of Toretsk. That's all that they have. It's not really in Toretsk, but they're claiming it, and that is being stormed at the moment. But Russia is also very quickly moving to surround or at least cut off the supply lines into Pokrovsk. They're well into the southwest of Pokrovsk that way, which is very dangerous position for them to be for the Kiev regime. But also Russia had major advancements in Chasiv Yar, in the Kupiansk area across the Oskol and the Zherebets River. Russia has a big buildup there, and no matter how many reinforcements the Kiev regime keeps shoving into the Kursk incursion zone, that pocket keeps getting smaller. They tried this local counterattack there. It was squashed. They keep tossing reinforcements there when they could be used more effectively on areas of the front that actually matter strategically. But this one is evidently important to Zelensky politically. So he keeps wasting what reinforcements and reserves that the Kiev regime still has available there, which I think Russia is quite happy to firebag them, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. I did want to ask you this. Glenn Deason, I don't know if you saw it, posted or tweeted something about the Russians being 6.5 kilometers from, what is it?
Yes.
Dnepropetrovsk?
From the Dnepropetrovsk region. Yes.
Yeah. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Okay. So if you go, Russia has taken Kharkov, right? Which is one of these logistics centers behind what had been the Kiev regime's defensive lines built up over a decade in the Donbass region. Right, it was Sleboda, Karahova, and then Pokrovsk. And Russia's already taken Sleboda and now Karahova, and they're encircling Pokrovsk. It's west of Karahova. That's operational space. There's nothing there, right? There's no significant urban settlements all the way to the banks of the Dnieper River. There is no geographical obstacles. It's largely steppe at that point. It's not the hills and forests, tight areas, easier to defend of the Donbass region. There's no major fortifications. So the Dnipropetrovsk region, the capital of which is Dnipropetrovsk, or Dnipro, as the Kiev regime now calls it. It's a major Ukrainian city. It's I believe it's the third largest city in Ukraine.
Wow.
It's also an important, Kiev, Kharkov, Dnipropetrovsk. It's also a major industrial center. So Russia has not entered the Dnipropetrovsk region yet, right? They've taken strikes into it, but they haven't entered it, maybe with some DRG groups at this point already. But if Russia decides to move west from Karahova, boom, they're into the Dnipropetrovsk region, right? There's absolutely nothing stopping them. It's like maybe 5 kilometers at this point, right? And they can essentially go unimpeded all the way to the banks of the Dnieper River. And of course, that would be seen as a further escalation by the West. Russia could very easily take the Dnipropetrovsk region, just as it has the Donbass, Kherson, Zaporozhye, and Crimea as well. I mean, it is still a Russian-speaking East Ukrainian region by and large. And we had a statement by Nikolai Patrushev in the last couple of days. Patrushev, he's the former head of the Russian National Security Council, right? He's a big deal, right? He doesn't speak when it's not intended to be important, right? It's meant that Western military intelligence pay attention. If he says something, it's coming from the top of the Russian government. And he is still on the Security Council. He has been replaced as head of the Security Council by Shoigu, but he has been put in charge of Russia's naval construction, navy and shipbuilding construction industry, particularly their tanker fleet. Which Russia already has some 600 tanker ships, right? The so-called shadow fleet, as the West like to call it, as if we're in Babylon 5 or something, simply because they don't control the insurance on these ships. But he's been put in charge of that, and that's actually his first educational and work experience background. So that's kind of I would say, a plum retirement for him, where he still has a seat on the Security Council and an important military industrial complex role. But Patrushev said basically that if this conflict goes on for more than a couple more months, that Ukraine may cease to exist in 2025, meaning that Russia will just take the whole thing. Certainly the Dnipropetrovsk region would be the first other region, right? Russia's already in Kharkov region, but Dnipropetrovsk would almost certainly be the next one there. Now, myself, I think 2025 is a little optimistic in that regard. I'll say that, but certainly it shows that this is what the Russian, you better come up with a deal that satisfies us on our terms real quick, or we're just going to take your whole little proxy state and regime change your regime change, right? I mean, that's what they're saying at this point. And then because we don't want to risk it again, there won't be an independent Ukraine, where Ukraine will become part of Russia again. That's basically what they're saying. And the Dnipropetrovsk region is, first in the targets of the potential regions that haven't been entered yet. And if Russia did take Dnipropetrovsk city, it would be a huge economic, industrial, social blow. I mean, at that point, Ukraine would not be Ukraine as it is today, right? It would already be a rump state. Just losing Dnipropetrovsk, it's a very big deal. And it has to be said that in the past week, Russia has also taken some of these vital resource in the Donbass that Lindsey Graham and BlackRock and others were salivating over. A big coke, a coal mine, of which coke for coking steel.
Oh, I was going to say, when you said coke, I thought Zelensky was going to be trying to get his mental coke. Are you kidding? That guy would be running out.
No, he would never give that up, right? I mean, he would sacrifice every Ukrainian for that. But it does mean that the Kiev regime's, the Ukraine steel industry is essentially shut down at this point. This was the primary source for that. Also, in Shevchenko, another area that Russia, a village, a town, really, I think that Shevchenko, a town, I would say, in the Donbass region, that has the largest lithium mines and reserves in Europe. And that is certainly something that Lindsey Graham himself was drooling over when he talked about sacrificing every Ukrainian for the U.S. to get a hold of it. So the Kiev regime has lost a lot of not just strategic nodes and territory in the last week, but they've also lost a lot of important economic nodes that don't look good for the Kiev regime moving forward. But I mean, Russia has been on the offensive for almost a year and a half now, and that doesn't appear like it's going to change.
Let me ask you this. I'd like to ask you a little bit about some of the politics in Europe and the instability. But I'm going to ask you about a particular country that someone was talking about it the other day, and I don't know much about what's happening politically, but it was being mentioned in the same discussion as, Slovakia and Hungary and even Austria, some of the countries that are really turning away from the neoliberal order, shall we say. Czechoslovakia. I don't know what's going on with their government. What's their government? Where do they?
Okay, there is no country of Czechoslovakia.
Or what is it now? The Czech Republic.
There is the Czech Republic,
yes.
And there is Slovakia, right? And
that shows how much I know about it. I didn't know the name of the damn country.
Slovakia, or Slovak Republic. They, of course, Robert Fico is the prime minister there. And he is a hardcore, old school leftist, right? He is essentially an unrepentant, unreformed communist. I mean, to call things as it were. He's an old school lefty dinosaur. And he is also very openly Slavophile, right? He supports Russia. He doesn't make any bits about it. He supported the Soviet Union. He supports Russia. And he has visited the Kremlin in the last month. And he survived an assassination attempt by a pro-Kiev regime radical extremist nutball in Slovakia because he refused to continue providing arms to the Kiev regime once he became prime minister. And Slovakia is one of the countries that is most affected by the Kiev regime shutting down gas transit from Russia to Europe through the Druzhba pipeline. That is a huge blow to the Slovak economy. And Fico has promised a response. He considers it a Ukrainian attack on Slovakia's energy security. And he has, this is the amazing thing. It shows you how grateful the Kiev regime has been. One of the way that they have managed to still keep electricity flowing despite Russia's damage to their electrical infrastructure is they've been connected to the European electrical grid at several points. And the key one is Slovakia. Slovakia has been providing large amounts of electricity. And now Ukraine turns around, and to thank them for that, they shut down the gas. And Fico has been quite clear. There are multiple consequences, that he intends to respond to this by. But he already said that one of them that he's strongly considering is just shutting down the flow of electricity. You're going to shut off energy to us, we'll shut off energy to you. So that's there. And the Czech Republic as well, it has not reached the same level of shall we say, disenchantment with the Kiev regime, but there is growing sentiment among non-centrist Czech political parties, and I would say growing sentiment on the ground in Czech, and the possibility in the future of a government change of a country that, if not openly pro-Russia, at least is not pro-Kiev regime, which is something that we're also looking at in Austria. That's what we're facing in Austria. And it's very interesting because it's almost in this way a political restoration of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is a throwback, a historical, in the aftermath of World War I, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Romanov Empire in Russia both collapsed. But here we see the independent countries of Central Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, that were once a part of this, independently adopting very similar positions now, and obviously a tendency, a growing trend in those that haven't gone in that direction yet, but to start moving in that direction of, again, let's generously call it skepticism of the Kiev regime, and not open animosity, not rabid hatred of Russia, right? We that's in Hungary, for instance, Viktor Orban is not pro-Russian. Viktor Orban is pro-Hungarian. He just happens to have a hard-nosed, realist view of what is in Hungary's interests and is what is going on in Ukraine. Fico in Slovakia, he's a different story. He's pro-Russian. Right? I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts, those sort of things about it. But I think if these right-leaning Kiev skeptic governments come to power in Austria and potentially in the future in Czech as well, that will almost be a sweep of this former, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and that's very interesting from a historical and a modern political sociological dimension.
What are your thoughts about the German elections? We've got them coming up. We've got, Musk and, I don't know about Trump, but, Musk sticking, giving them his 2 cents worth. We've got the AfD rising. And I suspect a month of Trump, one way or the other, is going to have some kind of effect on it. Your thoughts on the German elections? Okay,
unfortunately, right, we're seeing the alternative for Germany, the AfD, the alternative for Deutschland. They are pilloried in Germany and the West as a far right party, right? There have been people previously in the past that you might consider far right. I think they've more fallen the rubric of the Trumpian alt-right. I think that is a closer estimation of what they are. But they are, very much in the Trump mold, I would say. They want to cut support to the Kiev regime. They want an end to these sanctions. They want to rebuild the Nord Stream pipelines. And the Alternative for Deutschland is actually running a woman, the co-chair of the party, as their chancellor candidate. And they have more support now in Germany than ever before in history. That's scaring a lot of people in Germany and Europe. A lot of it is needlessly because of this, this type of scaremongering that has been done. But if you are a European EU technocrat, right, from Brussels, that believes in U.S.-led Western global hegemony, then you should be scared, right? Because Germany defecting from that would be a sea change for Europe. However, what all the polls are showing right now, and of course, take polls with a grain of salt always. Although I think they're a lot closer in Germany than they have been recently in the United States. The AfD will probably come in second in the election, but even if they come in first, they won't be able to form a government because no other party will cooperate with them to form a government. They won't have an overall majority because there's more than two parties, right? There's 4 or 5 that will, have significant vote share. And the most likely result of the election, all the polls continue to say, is that the Christian Democratic Union, a center-right party, the party of Angela Merkel, under their current head, Friedrich Merz, will probably win a plurality of the election, right? They'll probably come in first. But even if they come in second, they will, which I think is unlikely, but even if they come in behind, they'll still be the party to form a government. They'll form a government with the now defeated SPD, the Socialist Party of Olaf Scholz, and probably the Greens as well, because I don't think that just between the CDU and the SPD there will be enough there to form a government. I think they'll probably need a third party. But regardless, every party will cooperate with each other to prevent the AfD from coming to power, and thus a huge change in German foreign and military policy. Just like in France, the entire political regime came down to prevent Le Pen's National Rally Party from forming a government there. And similar in Netherlands with the Geert Wilders party as well. This is the center-right, center-left, hegemonic, centrist, triangulated politics that support the EU technocracy, hanging on to power in all of these countries, right? By not even a hand, by a fingernail at this point, right? They're not winning elections, they're losing elections. And all of the forces that are, criticize, their sanctions regime and all the blowback damage it has done to Europe, criticize their immigration policies, these neoliberal policies that drive down wages for workers and people in their own societies. And there's also cultural issues for many of them as well. But there's a sea change politically against them in Europe, right? The tide is still rising against them. And at this point, they're just hanging on, even if they're not able to get a plurality, by cooperating together to prevent an outside party from changing their geopolitical and foreign policy orientation. We've seen it in France. We've seen it. We're seeing it now in Germany. We've seen it in the Netherlands, in other countries, right? Slovakia and Hungary, there was enough to the right or in Hungary or to the left in Slovakia to break that hegemonic center. In other, larger, more populous European countries like Germany, France, they're still clinging on. I think you could even make the same claim in Germany. I'm sorry, in Italy as well, with the government of Meloni. She's kind of a last-ditch effort to prevent a more substantial alternate political regime from taking power in the country. So there's a whole lot of political crisis going on in Europe, which is all very interesting. A great deal of it is blowback from their policies in Ukraine, whether directly over the issue of Ukraine or simply over the suicidal damage they've done to their own countries and economies because of the sanctions against Russia. Even if there's not that direct attribution to the conflict in Ukraine, it is ultimately because of that, even if the European media never wants to admit that. And it's not done yet, right? This is still going on, but it's complicating things for the Europeans. The EU, shall we say, ruling political and military elite, that even if Trump tries to de-escalate the U.S. role in Ukraine, they want to continue the conflict. The head of the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, said this week that Europe, NATO, but he's speaking of the European countries of NATO, need to prepare for a war footing. And he's obviously talking about Russia there. But my big question is, I take what he says seriously in that I believe that he and a lot of other people within the EU ruling elite really do want to go down that road. But how can you do it when you've got this whole sea change in multiple political crisis going on in multiple European countries, in France, in Germany, and potentially others against this whole policy? It's making it all extremely difficult. The problem in Germany is if there is a coalition government formed with the Christian Democratic Union, Friedrich Merz at the head, he has promised to escalate Germany's role in Ukraine. In fact, he has long talked up the idea of sending the German cruise missiles, the Taurus, right? Which actually has a longer range than both the Storm Shadows and the U.S. ATACMS missiles. Now, does Germany have Taurus cruise missiles in large enough supply that would change the outcome on the battlefield in Ukraine? No, they do not, right? And Russian air defense and electronic warfare have shown how quickly they developed a profile and rendered the Storm Shadows and the ATACMS missiles as inconsequential, right? That Russia is able to take them down, I don't know, 70% of the time, 80, as long as they have electronic warfare and air defense assets. But it's maybe not the last escalation that Merz would be interested in. So the hegemonic center could yet strike back in Germany. In fact, I would say that's the most likely result of upcoming elections in Germany, and still hang on and try to, keep up this proxy war against Russia in Ukraine, even if Trump tries to walk the U.S. away from it, which I'm also not counting on. And neither is the Russian government, it needs to be said.
Let me throw this at you, because I'm glad you went there. Well, this will be the last thing we'll talk about today. In America, Trump said, I remember this. A lot of Muslim voters wouldn't vote for the Democrats, and Trump went to all of these Muslim places and said, you vote for me, I'll end it, the conflict. And they voted for it. And for the most part, a lot of people said, Trump's going to do whatever Israel tells him to do. He's not going to try to end anything. He's going to up it. He's going to improve it. And, Trump said, the hostages better be gone when I come in or there'll be hell to pay. Trump, maximalist Joe Trump. Everything we're reading, everything I've been able to research seems to show that Trump sent some guy named Smitkov to Israel. And the Israelis said, oh, we can't talk to you. We'll be busy till Tuesday, till right now, but we'll get with you Saturday. And he said, no, hell no, I'll be here. And I need to talk to you. Then he came in and he says, you're taking the deal. And then he left. It appears to be, based on what I've read, the Israelis were unhappy about that. Which, to be quite frank, in reading that and knowing Trump, kind of makes sense because that's the way Trump thinks. He's, okay. And a lot of people were shocked that, damn, Trump did what he said. And, we always look at Trump and say, he's full of crap. He'll never do that. But you never know.
Yeah.
Do you look at that and say, all right, of course, Trump's full of crap, this and that. But maybe it's possible that he may just come in and say, I really do want to end this and do the things necessary. You know what I mean? I mean, you can't count on that. But in looking at that Israeli thing going on, notwithstanding whether the Israelis will still do it or not, but just based on what Trump did when everybody thought he was going to do the opposite.
Yes.
Your thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a couple of interesting data points here that are making everyone, including the Western press, and I think us, reassess and simply question what exactly is Trump's opinion about Israel, the current conflict in Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. Because based on his first administration, I mean, you couldn't really get any closer than Trump. And I mean, they were sharing the same bed. Jared Kushner, was jetting back and forth. There was huge support. And suddenly we're seeing some very interesting things that might indicate that things have really changed. And one of those is that a Trump social media account on Truth Social, whether Trump himself actually posted this or not, we don't know. Right? He does supposedly like taking control of his social media himself, but he posted a video by the Columbia University professor, Jeffrey Sachs, whom was once a head globalist, but then basically had a Damascene conversion and became a one of the most vocal and eloquent critics of U.S. foreign policy and U.S. led Western global hegemony. And in this video, he was extremely critical. I mean, like rhetorically throwing it down against not only Israeli policy, but against Netanyahu as a person. And Trump posted this, and by all accounts in the Israeli press, this was noticed, right? I mean, this wasn't Netanyahu canceled a trip to the United States where there's talk that he may have been going to attend the Trump inauguration, even though that's not the tradition for foreign leaders to attend the U.S. president's inauguration. But now it's completely off the board. And evidently the Netanyahu government was absolutely furious that this was reposted, and now they're talking. And now this push by the Trump admin, evidently the Biden administration has been trying to claim credit for this talk of an impending ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. And as far as we can tell, again, we don't have a written copy of a proposed ceasefire, but everything that's being reported says that it is previous deals that Israel refused to. And part of what is being committed is, yes, if this deal is real and actually is enacted, Hamas would be handing back all of their hostages to Israel. But Israel would then be turning around and handing back all the Palestinians that it holds hostage to the Palestinian people, whether in Hamas, in Gaza, or in the West Bank. And it has to be said that Israel holds like 50 Palestinian hostages or prisoners or detainees or whatever you want to call them if you don't want to acknowledge what they really are. There's like 50 of them. That's the deal. It'll be like 50 for every hostage returned, which of course Israel has always, completely refused to do. And that was actually part of the Hamas calculation in taking their hostages. You take our people hostage, we will take your people hostage, right? That, you can argue whether you think that is moral or not, but that is the way Hamas has viewed it. And also, apparently, this ceasefire deal would also see Israel withdraw from Gaza and from the border between Gaza and Egypt. And there's nothing about any attempt to remove Hamas from political power in Gaza. That's huge. I mean, that's a victory that's
that's a loss for Israel. Yeah,
for Hamas. Yeah, that's a huge. So I have very serious questions. Supposedly, again, this is all, nothing is coming from any U.S. official that there has been any ceasefire accepted or any Israeli official. It's all unofficial, being discussed by officials, to media people. So this is all coming out through the media. I have serious questions. There have been so many ceasefire agreements before that have not, Israel simply says Hamas isn't fulfilling it and then starts bombing again and it all goes away. And that appears to be what Israel is doing again, right? They've already said that Hamas is not following through, and Hamas denies it and says they're fully committed to it. But I'm very interested in what I haven't seen is, what did the Trump's envoy say to Netanyahu to threaten him into accepting what he has vehemently and completely refused before? That's really interesting, and that's what I haven't heard anyone say. Even if this doesn't go down, right? Even if this doesn't happen as it's being talked about, if Israel once again walks away from it, I'm still very interested to know what threats or carrot and stick did the Trump administration offer Netanyahu in order to, force him to adopt this change in position. It's very interesting, and I agree with you that the number one takeaway that we should have is what we expected as an unabashedly pro-Israel, bosom buddy with Netanyahu, Trump foreign policy towards the Middle East may not be that. Again, it's early days. He hasn't taken office yet. There is no actual ceasefire yet, but it's what everyone is talking about, across the news, the mainstream media, the alt media, everything. And everything is up in the air. It's the Trumpian chaos bomb once again, right? I always talk about the chaos bomb. No one expected it. No one, right? No. Right? And the Trump chaos bomb is now going off apparently on Israel. And everyone is still like, what?
Trump always leaves you doing that. I'd say this. If I were the Ukrainians, I wouldn't see that as a positive sign for me. Number one, I think he hates Netanyahu. He got pissed off when Netanyahu immediately congratulated. But how Trump is.
Okay, first of all, I have to say, if he got personally upset with Netanyahu for congratulating Biden's victory, then that tells us what an unstable and non-politically mature person Trump is, right? Because he's the president of the elected president of the United States. He won the election. Netanyahu obviously preferred Trump. He wanted Trump to win, but he still got a deal with the president. And Israel's position ultimately, completely depends on U.S. support. So if Trump really did take umbrage at that, well, then the man's ego and itself is a traumatic chaos bomb danger to everything. I think there's probably a bit more there than that. And this very interesting thing with this Jeffrey Sachs video is, have some people sat down and had a talk with Trump and actually influenced him about the nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Israel's role in the Middle East? And has he even, is there some critical opinions bouncing around underneath that hair somewhere? I don't know. It's all very interesting. We don't know. But you're free to speculate. I don't, as a rule, do hope. But I do note interesting data points. And there's a lot of interesting data points that contradict a lot of previous assumptions about Trump foreign policy in the Middle East that are coming out, in these last lame duck days of the Biden administration before Trump is inaugurated once again as president of the United States. It's all very interesting. It's an interesting time to be alive as the supposed Chinese curse.
Okay. Well, you know what, Mark? I throw two things at you. One, and we'll make this then, we're running out of our hour. One, I heard Dr. Jeffrey Sachs say, I've been called, he has everybody's number. He's Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, for God's sakes. I've been calling the Biden administration. They stopped taking my calls because he was calling them saying, you're screwing up. You're going to get us all killed, blah, blah, blah. They stopped taking my calls. They no longer taking my calls, which leads me to believe that there's practically no way that he wasn't calling the people in the Trump group, because he knows a bunch of them very well and he's friends with some of them. Okay. So there ain't no way in hell that he was calling and talking to the Biden administration and they stopped taking his calls, that he ain't talking to the Trump administration.
Yeah, not all of them. I seriously doubt that he's friends with Mark Rubio or Mike Pence.
Right. But there are some of them who I will guarantee will take his call. Right. Yeah. So I don't think it's an accident. I think he's talking to people and now some heretical ideas may now be bouncing around underneath that orange hairpiece. Yeah, right. Yeah, good point. Now, here's my cynical and conspiracy theory laden thoughts to throw at you, Mark.
Give me the dish.
Okay. One of the things, I'm a big believer that there's very powerful people, there's ruling elite, there's factions of the ruling elite that fight amongst each other, all that kind of stuff.
Lizard people.
Nah, rich people, very, very wealthy people. You know what I mean? Who have a lot of power.
Close enough.
And that at least a faction or some of these people have said, the Biden administration have taken it too far. Trump, get us out of this mess. Trump, you are authorized, I'm just going to use this term because it works, by the ruling elite, be knighted by us as our guy. We want you to get us the hell out of this Israel thing. It's destroying Israel and it's causing us problems. We want us to get to the hell out of this Ukrainian thing because that's going to get us nuked. And we're like trying to do transhumanist stuff so we can like move our minds to computers so we can live forever. And it ain't going to work if we get nuked. Donald Trump, you're officially given the authority to get us the hell out of this stuff. We got a bigger fish to fry. We got other things. Now, some people would argue they want to attack China. However, let me throw one other thing in. Donald Trump recently said, we need to have a meeting with the leaders of the powers, of the superpowers, the world powers, me, Trump, and Xi. These big, powerful tech bros.
Trump, Putin, and Xi.
Yeah, Trump, Putin, and Xi. Yeah. Okay. These big tech bros make a lot of money in China. There's a whole lot of people making a fortune, a mint in. They're printing money out of China. They don't want a war with China. They got their factories there. They got everything. They're factions of the ruling elite that fight. What if there is a faction of the ruling elite that said, we need you to clean up these friggin' crazy messes that the Biden lunatics, if that faction of the ruling elite is a problem, they're out of there. Trump, clean this up, and then we'll go on whatever we're going to do. What do you think about that, Mark, as a cynical conspiracy theory that the ruling elite are really controlling this stuff?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I don't think there's any question that to a very large degree, even though they present themselves as a democracy, that the U.S. is de facto an oligarchy. In fact, no less a person than the recently expired president, Jimmy Carter, said as much, the former U.S. president, right? But I think you're right that traditionally, at least in the modern age, these oligarchs, these American oligarchs, have run the country from behind the scenes, right? Through campaign finance, influence, right? But now we see a rather interesting thing where some of the defectors, right? Some of these oligarchs who do not share the worldview and consensus of the blob, right? Of the U.S. foreign policy elite, are now coming to power and exerting political influence in a way that they never have before. And Elon Musk is certainly the foremost among them, but he's certainly not the only one. Zuckerberg, very late, is trying to jump on this train as well and pull a 180-degree turn on what he had become. And this has led Joe Biden actually quite hilariously, to warn about oligarchs and oligarchy in the U.S. Like you haven't been completely backed by just oligarchs with a more conventional U.S. foreign policy up till now. And so we now see this phenomenon that, there are now obviously good oligarchs and bad oligarchs. And good oligarchs like George Soros are allowed to spend money and interfere in countries in Europe, politics in Europe and the United States, left and right, countries around the world. But if oligarchs outside of that worldview, that consensus, like Elon Musk and a few others, and now apparently Zuckerberg as well, are jumping on another worldview, those are bad oligarchs.
And maybe even Bezos. Maybe even Bezos. Bezos seems to be vacating the traditional oligarchy.
Bezos, it certainly appears to be playing around that fence, right? I mean, he's
wait a minute. Where does all of the stuff that sells on Amazon come from again? China, perhaps.
I have heard
hell.
that the CEO of TikTok, which is supposed to be effectively shut down on January 19th, he's supposed to be coming to Trump's inauguration now. And Trump evidently has become a big fan of TikTok, right? He's big on TikTok. So this is all very, very interesting. And this is a particular spread of oligarchs that have enormous political influence because of their control of the online, the global public square, right? Of Twitter X, of Facebook, of Google, right? Of these and Bezos, the Washington Post, the U.S. paper of record. There obviously is a defection, or shall we say, a war of influence by the oligarchs going on right now. And one of the most interesting, not entirely commendable, right? I don't like the idea of an oligarch running of one side or another, whatever their politics are, of determining things in Hungary and Russia, in the United States, in Germany, or anywhere. So the oligarchs now, apparently, with the Trump administration, are taking power openly, right? Not even hiding behind shadows. Trump, of course, himself, maybe he's not an oligarch. He's a mini-garch, right?
Yeah.
He likes to inflate his sense of self-wealth. But if Musk is going to head up this DOGE, this undefined Department of Government Efficiency, and Zuckerberg is like, I want a position too. I want a position too. This is crazy. I mean, this is open oligarchy now. It's just, again, heretical oligarchs.
And let's not forget, Bezos said he refused to allow the Washington Post to endorse Harris. The guy that owns the LA Times refused to let them endorse Harris. I saw that as those are all, as you said, data points that there is an element, there's a faction of the oligarchs.
There's no question.
That
it's not a conspiracy.
And what Trump is doing, there ain't no way in hell he could have did that with Israel unless he had some very powerful people saying, we want you to do it. We got your back. And let's not forget, there are the Israeli government and the Mossad. We're not thrilled with there's some issues they have with Netanyahu. There could have been very powerful forces in Israel saying to Trump's people, they're tearing our country apart. Can you get us out of it? You know what I mean? This is not just Donald Trump waking up saying, I think I'm going to end this. Make a phone call.
This is Trump saying, taking the throne of the swamp and saying, Godzilla, Rodan, get out of the water. You're out of here. King Kong, Mothra, the water's fine. Come on in. Right? I mean, that's what this is. Let's be honest about that.
How about this? He realized he couldn't drain the swamp, so he figured exactly what you said. I'll take these alligators in and at least maybe I can I've got some crocodiles that are a little more amenable to me. So maybe, I mean, realistically, maybe it is a stark realization by Trump that I can never drain this swamp. That ain't what this swamp does. But the swamp can be adjusted and trained with various alligators, or the other way around.
The swamp can be filled with creatures loyal to me.
I think you're right. I think it's a direction. And I think that bodes well for the Ukraine conflict, because in the same way that there was like, no way, Trump's going, are you kidding? Israel, he'll never. What the hell happened? If the people with power say to Donald Trump, do what you got to do, just like get us out of that. We're freaked out about that. Get it done. The other day, Trump literally said, they said, how's this going to end? And he literally said, Vladimir Putin's going to decide how the war ends, which is about the most honest thing that he said yet.
It's about the most honest thing that anyone has said yet in the United States. That's
heresy. That gets you burned at the stake in
Brussels. He also said he understood Putin's concern about the expansion of NATO. Those things were not allowed to be said, not just by politicians, but even in the Western media since, for the last 4 years.
These are signals in the same way that, let me say this. I know I said that for the last thing, but we'll make this the last. In the same way, I don't think it's an accident. And you made a good point. It may not be just Trump. It ain't an accident that this Jeffrey Sachs thing comes up and it comes out and everybody's like, holy crap, did you see what Trump did? And they give us a week to talk about it, a week to digest it, a week for it to be everywhere. The Israelis to freak out about it. And after a good week, the shoe drops. This is over. Get the hell out. In the same way, it's possible that Trump makes these statements to set the table. Yeah, it's about this. I understand he makes these heretical statements that can never be made. That sets him a week or so that when he gets in, he can come in and say some things that need to be said, that in truth and do some things that are the only way to end it. But maybe he set the table in the same way by saying the things that can't be said.
Right now, what I see right now, the Trumpian chaos bomb, again, it's like a bouncing Betsy. It bounces here, it bounces there. It's very unpredictable. It's going off on the transatlantic relationship with Europe. Boom, right? It's potentially going off on the U.S.-Israeli relationship, or at least the U.S. Netanyahu relationship. Boom. And if the biggest boom yet is Trump and his team intend to concentrate more on their war with the U.S. deep state, the blob, the permanent bureaucracy, that creates room for Russia, for China, right? This will be the U.S., the Trump administration, potentially more concerned with reforming the U.S. political elite and his war on factions in the U.S. political elite that have openly waged war on him previously, right? That is previous, a vengeance, very much a biblical vengeance thing going on here. That will create room for Russia and Ukraine, right? Whether that's intentional or not, right? That will, and China will also be interestedly observing and just continue with what they're doing. I mean, that's always what China's been doing, right? China never reacts. It just keeps winning by not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right.
The ultimate sin thing, right? Acting without acting.
And without active U.S. support for Israel, well, I mean, that could change a lot of the calculus in the Middle East as well.
Trump's tight with the Saudis. I guarantee you, the Saudis, next comes from the Saudis. Here's the next shoe. The Saudis will be happy to normalize relations with Israel if Israel fill in the blank. You see what I'm saying? He's very tight with the Saudis.
He is, but the Saudis have also become very tight with Russia.
Yes. But Trump don't dislike Russia,
which is interesting.
Yeah, he's okay with that.
Yeah. There may not be a huge conflict. There is room for there not to be a conflict of interest between those two perspectives. That Saudi Arabia, during at least a Trump administration, can play footsie with both the U.S. and Russia.
Well, if the conflict ends and if things start to kind of heal, because the Saudis can't do anything with you. The
Saudis, I think they've been pretty clear that there will be no normalization of relations. They've said this outright with Israel until there is a Palestinian state. Recognized.
So it gives a lot of people room to do things, and he's tight with the Saudis, and he can do some things with them. I also think this. I really believe this. I believe, right, whatever. Trump wants to turn down the volume on some of this stuff because I think he wants to focus, on the political situation, the people attacked him. I really believe he wants to rebuild the economy. I'm not saying he can with his policies. but I think he wants to focus on the U.S.
Are you telling me that you don't believe that King Donald the Orange of Greenland will resuscitate the American economy?
Well, I'm not saying that it's possible under the neoliberal financialization that we have. I'm just saying what I think Trump's trying to do, what I think the direction he's going in. And I think that has to do with turning down the volume. I think a lot of people got scared as hell by the Biden, Blinken, Sullivan madness and want some kind of a very serious reset. Some very powerful people, I think, got horrified and scared they were going to die. Very accurate concern. And I just feel like we're going in a different direction and people are going to be really, really surprised. And I don't know where that leaves the European ruling elite. The Kiev people and the European ruling elite are the ones that are, if you ask me, they're the ones that'll be really left out in the cold because there's very reasonable leaders where you may agree or not agree with their way of doing things in their own countries in the Middle East. They're like WIIFM, what's in it for me? Let's work out a deal. They may not be the greatest guys in the world and lovely people, but I'm saying there's reasonable leaders in the Middle East. He's good with Russia and China. He don't hate the leaders of Russia and China, but the European ruling elite have painted themselves into a damn corner. And their own people hate them. If the government of the U.S. under Trump hates them too.
For this increasingly desperate, hanging on to power EU ruling elite, I'm going to channel my native inner Pennsyltucky here and say that, yeah, they're up shit's creek without a paddle.
That's a fact. That is a fact. Yeah, exactly. All right, Mark Sleboda, where can everybody go to find all your good works online?
You can find me on Elon Musk's Twitter X at Mark Sleboda1. You can also find me on Telegram and Substack at The Real Politique with Mark Sleboda.
All right, thanks a lot. Everybody, don't forget, we got a join button. Push the join button to become a member for this channel. If you can support the channel, that's great. Even if you can't, doesn't matter. Share this on all your social media platforms. We are out.